the Labour Party is facing fresh scrutiny about where it gets its money. 5 days ago, it was the result of revelations that the party collected more than $4 million in gambling donations in 5 years. A chunk of that while it dithered on gambling reform and then backed down from a full crackdown on betting advertising. And now, another donation that has raised eyebrows. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris, and you're listening to The Morning Edition from The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. Today, investigative reporter Lucy Mackin on the billionaire's son who allegedly offered to donate money to the Labour Party during a function attended by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and why it's under question. It's July the 27th. Lucy, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Sam.
Okay, last Monday, Anthony Albanese's prime ministerial limousine rolled through the gates of the Sydney residence of a 25-year-old man named Felix Lee, and most of us have never heard of this man, I imagine, but ever since, it's been the subject of massive newspaper pieces, some screaming headlines. What was going on at that house, Lucy?
Well, what was Mr. Albanese thinking, actually? But
Well, do tell.
You'd have to ask him, get him on the podcast.
Okay, I'm going to try to.
But really what was happening was some sort of donor event. You know, a handful or half a dozen of really serious business leaders were in attendance. So was Mr. Albanese. The big question mark is of the donation that was made to ALP coffers, you know, was it $1 million? Was it much less than that? But more importantly for our efforts, I mean, it raises the question of where is the money, the Lee family money coming from? And I don't think, I don't know many 25-year-olds who run a sort of $2 billion investment fund out of their family office. I have to confess I was not doing that at 25. I was in the Herald office.
Yeah.
So the question comes, though, Felix, to his credit, has gone to great lengths to set himself up as a young businessman, albeit from family wealth, but at great lengths to distinguish himself from his father. Now, his father might be more well known to Sydney-siders. Philip Dong Fang Lee. I've been acquainted with Philip Dong Fang Lee since he bought his Point Piper trophy home, the one with the beautiful sandstone gates and the European villa style, fascia that looks over Sydney Harbour, stunning views. He bought that in 2015 for just shy, a bit of coinage shy of $40 million. It was a non-waterfront record for that year. Yada, yada, yada. It seemed like a lot of money at the time, but of course right behind it is a property called Uig Lodge, which tech bro Scott Farquhar lives in, and he bought for $130 million cash. So, all things in perspective, I guess. But more pertinently for Mandalay, it is actually the home of Philip Lee and his wife Zhao Bei-shi. And Felix lives in the Art Deco apartments next door. But if you're going to host the Prime Minister for dinner and Mum and Dad have a house like that, you're going to go next door for it. Now, as I understand it, it remains unknown if Philip Lee was in attendance, but the simple level is, where is this money that is going into ALP coffers coming from? And better yet, where is the money, the Lee family money coming from? And what we have is this, I'm sure, very qualified, very successful, very intelligent 25-year-old who the message I'm being given from all quarters is that his grandmother, his paternal grandmother, Philip Lee's money is funding him.
Okay, well, let's get into this because you raised at the very top, okay, why was Anthony Albanese there? As though there might be something wrong with that. But for those who are listening, they're going, okay, so he's been offered a donation. The Financial Review has reported it's $1 million, but government sources are telling us that it's drastically lower. And the Prime Minister, he's at this dinner. It's at an illustrious mansion. This family has a lot of money. So listeners might be thinking, okay, what's the problem with that? But you and our colleague Nick McKenzie, a little bit more about the family and their wealth, and particularly about Felix Lee's father, Philip. So tell us about that.
Yeah, look, Philip Lee became the subject of more headlines, not just for his property, but because he was a star witness in the 2002 Star City casino inquiry, public inquiry into Star City's right to have a licence. And in it, the revelations were extraordinary, the extent of his gambling. But it also raised questions as to why, more than $100 million has been funneled over years through the casino for Mr. Lee. In the background to that, the tax office, unbeknownst to me at the time, was undertaking an audit of Mr. Lee's financials. You know, on a very sort of outside looking in perspective, Mr. Lee, he doesn't work in Sydney. He's a businessman. So, you know, there's no wage that I can see that he's going off to, and yet he's extraordinarily rich. You know, there are houses in Bellevue Hill and Chatswood and investments and you know, all of this property in the mid-north coast, a huge amount of rural and bushland. So the question has become, where is his money coming from? Felix Lee maintains it's coming from his paternal grandmother and has nothing to do with his dad, and therefore nothing to do with the dubious funneling of money through the Star City casino.
Detail that to us. Detail what the allegations are that result from this previously confidential, as I understand it, affidavit that was prepared by the Australian Tax Office in 2021. Our mastheads spent months trying to get their hands on this, essentially. And I understand from this that, tell me if I'm right, chief among the allegations are details about, quote, sham arrangements, unquote, whereby purported loans from Philip's 92-year-old mother, friends, and business associates were designed to conceal the true source and character of the foreign income. So what does this all mean? You know, why is this so bad, Lucy, if it is?
Well, if it's a loan, it's arguably, and most usually it is, that it's not taxed as income. It's a loan. You're going to be paying it back. So, right? Most of these transfers of money from Chinese accounts into Philip Lee's family's accounts were purported to be loans. But when the tax office went through and had a look at some of these loans, they actually dispute that they are loans. And in fact, they just say that this is a sham, as you say, the sham arrangement.
So just to translate this for those of us who aren't familiar with moving money from country to country. So essentially, the allegation is that the Lee family's wealth was, I guess, partly created via a scheme that effectively moves money into Australia from China. It's purported to be loans. The Australian Tax Office questions whether they're loans. And as I understand it, there's no suggestion by this masthead that the allegations are true, only that they've been made. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. So in some of the loans, for example, a $25 million so-called loan from Philip's mother in China, it was executed, signed in Shanghai and witnessed by Philip's sister. But as the tax office claims, his sister was in Australia at the time. It's very difficult to sign documents at that time. DocuSign wasn't a thing.
Okay, so we've got this information about these alleged loans that the tax office, it seems to be suggesting, might not be loans to Philip Lee from his elderly mother. What relationship is there between those loans and Philip's son, Felix Lee, who has allegedly then made this donation to Anthony Albanese?
Well, look, Felix has separated himself out from his dad's business. And to all intents and purposes, as far as anyone can see, that is certainly happening. He's best known for having the former Treasurer of Australia, Joe Hockey, as the chairman of his Lee family office, which is fairly reputable, I guess. But the issues that are raised in this is that Felix is Philip's son. He was raised here and he lives, next door to his parents. In the details that the ATO have itemised, when he was younger, the funds that were brought out to Australia via his grandmother, Felix's grandmother, were actually moved into his account to pay for some of the property in Sydney. So, for example, there was a doer-upper purchased in Bellevue Hill, and the funds for that were transferred from Philip's grandmother into Felix's bank account to pay for the property. Of course, it wasn't such a great deal for Felix because when it was sold a few years later, the $12 million, the vast majority of that went into Philip's bank account. More recently, there's a sort of pine plantation up on the mid-north coast. Now, that was bought using funds from his younger brother Edward's bank account. I think he was 10 or 12 at the time, certainly not old enough to be, walking around with $22 million. But that was used to buy it for $22 million. Now, it was held by Philip and his wife in their various corporate entities until last month, when the property was transferred to Felix's Lee family office. So, if nothing else, these sort of significant properties have transferred from father to son on our paper trail.
After the break.
Does it buy influence? Is there not good reason why Anthony Albanese took time out from his life to go to Point Piper and to have this dinner?
Okay, so we've got these allegations about, I guess, ways in which the Lee family have made their money. And I've got to say here, the ATO's allegations have led to no criminal charges.
Absolutely.
They've never been tested in any court after the ATO and Philip Lee reached a settlement that included paying back part of the tax liability. So I've got to set that straight. But I guess with all of this in mind, why could a donation to the Labour Party possibly be a concern?
Well, it depends on what sort of influence it takes with it. Well, we've been raising a storm too recently when Gina Reinhardt gifted a private jet to Pauline Hanson to go around the country and talk. But does it buy influence? Is there not good reason why Anthony Albanese took time out from his life to go to Point Piper and to have this dinner? I mean, it's about raising these questions, and I think a little bit more clarity and oversight or transparency about this is what's needed.
I guess further to that, does it possibly raise questions about alleged foreign interference? Or I guess more broadly, questions about whether politicians should be more careful about where money comes from?
Look, the foreign interference question was raised with another billionaire, Huang Xingmo, in Mossman. But his interests, I think this is different. The fact is Philip Lee doesn't go back to China. He doesn't base himself there. He's based in Sydney. He's an Australian, has been for 28 years. So I think it's a little bit different. It's more a question of the influence that is coming with this money from Felix. And I think, Felix is trying to set himself up and establish his name. That's great. But I think that the issue is where is these funds coming from that are buying such influence, if they are.
And so I guess tell us a bit more about Felix Lee and about the Lee family. What sort of influence could they be wanting, perhaps? Are there certain, matters in which they might want to have influence?
Well, I don't know. When Mr. Albanese visited the house, he probably didn't check title records on the way through. It's sort of the only thing I would do. I think I'm the only human in the world who would. But if he had, he might have noticed the mortgage on title. It was held by his own tax department as security for the tax dispute that's been playing out between Philip Lee and the tax office. That dispute has since settled. And while Philip Lee's properties, including this house, were frozen a few years ago, those freeze orders have been discharged and there is a settlement of sorts over the tax dispute. It's just not known how much they have settled that a bank account for. But the fact remains that the ATO remains in control of Philip Lee's property empire and his wife's property empire. And so does he need any help with that? I don't know. Is he hoping for a little bit of, I don't know. Look, to be honest, he's a very private and reclusive businessman. I'm yet to get an answer to a call or a text, and it's been a decade.
Okay, and I do want to ask, though, if it took our mastheads months of fighting with the courts to release these previously secret affidavits, which do sort of, I guess, lift the lid off a bit of mystique which has surrounded, as I understand it, Philip Lee's financial dealings. Like you say, he's a private businessman. Could our Prime Minister have reasonably known before attending this lavish dinner party about the allegations against Felix Lee's father?
Look, I don't think it's reasonable necessarily. I don't want to sort of give anyone a free pass, but is it reasonable that he knew about the tax? He wouldn't have known. I'm sure he doesn't go around to every single department in the federal government and ask them how people are, whether they're paying their tax. He might not meet many people in parts of Australia if he did. But that said, it isn't a secret that Philip Lee's relations with the authorities have been a bit fraught since he came here.
Is that right? Like, so how well known has that been? And
well, I've written at least a half a dozen stories again and again. I think I don't know if people have been bored about hearing, but on the mid-north coast, he owns a very significant waterfront bushland retreat at Fame Cove, and he has owned it for a long time. There has been a series of environmental breaches on it since 2009. He has garnered the attentions of the state regulatory authorities for some of the breaches there, and it was last written about by me last year in regards to some orders from the Land and Environment Court to restore parts of the property. So that has all been on the public record.
So I guess, is it a bad look for Anthony Albanese to have attended this party and then accept a donation? And do we even know if he has accepted a donation from Felix Lee?
Look, we don't know. The question is, given the lack of transparency, it would be good to know, and it would be good to know what comes with it, what strings are attached at the back of it. The reality is, his office has said that it will be disclosed and in the appropriate channels at the appropriate time and not at the email or calls of Lucy Macken. So, yep. So anyway, but the reality is this should have been better known, I guess, beforehand, and now we do know, and he knows. And, if he was thinking why this might not be a good idea, he doesn't have to go back too far in time to the fortunes of our state governments as to how this stuff plays out when donations are made and there's a lack of transparency over them. And
are you thinking of any particular scandal, Lucy Macken?
Well, there was a certain Aldi bag that was full of cash.
Well, it's funny you mentioned this because you did mention that there was this incident. It was quite public, I guess. It was made quite public. I believe it was 2019, and there was a corruption inquiry into the state's donation laws.
Yeah, ICAC was damning about it.
That's right. After Chinese billionaire Zhuang Mo, who you mentioned before, he had delivered $100,000 in cash in an Aldi plastic bag. So I guess, is that why this is sort of perhaps such a interest?
Look, every case is actually different, and I'm not sure, I wouldn't actually go so far as to say foreign influence. It's just unknown influence with all of these donations, and it's crossed the political spectrum, right? I mean, when Simon Holmes Accord is funding the Teals through Climate 200, there are questions raised there. How much say does that give him in the policies of our Teals? Likewise, as we've mentioned, Gina Reinhardt with Pauline Hanson, Clive Palmer likes to have a little bit of a say in the political process and isn't afraid to pay for it. And none of the major parties are exempt from this at a state or a federal level.
And so, I mean, as a last question, Lucy, is that ultimately why you reported on this, why this matters, why it's important for us to know where money is being donated, where it comes from when people are donating to our political parties, and why the public should know? Like, is this why?
Well, look, if you take it back to a very basic level, when vast amounts of money come into the country and they are spent resetting, values in a way, it might just be non-waterfront records, in Point Piper of 10 years ago, right? It might be houses in Chatsworth. It might be, the reason we have public access to title records is because it speaks to where the money and the power and the wealth is in our society and where it is not. And without that sort of clarity as to what sort of money and where it's coming from that's paying for this stuff, we don't do well from it. We don't have a clear oversight of ourselves as a society. The economics at some point needs to feed into us as a society to let us know who we are and, who's on top and who is not. And it all feeds into that. And I hope to sort of sound simplistic about it all, but that's what we're effectively talking about. And at a far more advanced level, when it's donations and it's coming from 25-year-olds, where is that 25-year-old getting the funds to do this? What does his grandmother do? At the end of the day, even though we finally have a name and jobs and industries in China, that has funded the family wealth, there's still a lot of questions that the ATO have raised from this affidavit that remain unanswered.
Well, thank you so much, Lucy, for your time.
Thank you.
And just a note, Philip Lee did not respond to requests for comment from our mastheads. Asked about the Albanese dinner, a spokesperson for his son, Felix Lee, said he would not comment on private engagements. And in relation to his father, he said Philip Lee's tax affairs are his own and are not related to Felix Lee. Today's episode was produced by Josh Towers. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, and our podcasts are overseen by Lisa Muxworthy and Tom McKendrick. If you like our show, follow The Morning Edition and leave a review for us on Apple or Spotify. Thanks for listening.